What's up, footballers, and welcome back to the channel. I'm Jared Petrus, and today we're going to be going through a tier list of what I think are the most valuable assets that you should have as a football player. Whether you're developing at a youth academy or you're trying to play in the professional game, I think these are the skill sets that will take you to the next level and things you should be focusing on, right? And the reason why I'm making this video is because, as many of you know, I'm extremely passionate about helping young footballers, developing footballers, and really just cutting out all the middlemen and working directly with you guys, providing you guys with value, because I know when I was a young footballer, I was really in need of help, and if I didn't have help from coaches and people like me, I would have never made it to the highest level. So I know how footballers are. I know that the game means so much to them. The highs are high and the lows are low. So if I can help a player, any player out there, it just really gives me energy and makes my day. So from there, I also have all of my skill sets are coded with different colors. And the reason why that is because I have 5 pillars that I call the 5 pillars of football: physical, the tactical, the emotional, and the technical. But the 5th one is actually one that I've recently added, which is the career management pillar. So for me, they're extremely important. The 4 first pillars are used simultaneously at almost every moment in football. You have to have the tactical understanding of what to do, when to do it, why to do it. You have to have the physical capacity to execute it, the technical capacity to execute it, and you also need to have the emotional prowess to allow the alignment between the mind and body when you execute them. Like, if you don't have the confidence to go in for a 50-50 challenge, you're never going to be able to do it. So from there, I wanted to code them because I wanted to see how they line up in terms of the tiers. For example, we might have a lot of the physical elements mid-tier. We might have the emotional elements bottom tier, and so on. So it'll be interesting to just see how that plays out. But without any further ado, let's dive right into it. So first, let's start off with jumping. And jumping is a good skill to have. It can be very useful, but it's not something that I see particularly used a lot. It's usually used if, off of crosses or 50-50 challenges. But again, if you don't have the technical ability to head the ball properly, you can just jump really high. It's not that useful. So I'm just going to put that at D tier, and let's move on to the next. So next I'm going to have volleying. I'm going to put volleying at C tier. Again, this is more of a technical element, but volleying is obviously kind of like a subset of shooting. Not every player is going to shoot very often. I just can't think of too many wingbacks, for example, who've scored off of volleys. So it can be a game changer. It's definitely a fun skill to have because we all know some of those wonder goals, some of those players that could just like catch a ball really well, like Zlatan or Dimitar Berbatov. So it's definitely a really cool skill to have, especially when it like deviates. But I think I'm still gonna have to keep it in C tier. So game analysis, I'm actually going to put that in S tier. You're going to find a lot in this list that I'm going to have a lot of skills in S tier, or a lot of training types in S tier, simply because in order to make it to the highest levels, you have to be good at so many things. You have to be at a high level in all those different pillars. But I think game analysis in particular offers a lot of value, because if you analyze the best player in your position at the professional level, and you can take bits and pieces from them, then that is one of the most important things you can add to your game. It's a really strong ROI on time when it comes to developing your game. Not all players have a lot of time on their hands. They might be juggling school and work and things like that. So game analysis offers a lot of value, especially because it's in real time, and it's going to show where you are on the pitch from a bird's eye view, and it will also develop your soccer or football IQ. So easy S tier for me. The only caveat is you got to make sure you're doing it properly. You know how to analyze a game, or you find somebody who can analyze the game for you. So moving on to the next skill set, the next item is going to be career management. Okay, so I'm putting career management actually in front of game analysis, and as you're going to see, I'm not only going to rank these different skill sets by tier, I'm also going to rank it within the tiers. Okay, so I'm going to put career management above game analysis because I'm a true believer that career management can make or break a footballer. I've seen it happen many times. If you even look at the professional level, making a decision to leave a team or to go, find a different coach and things like that can have such an impact, not only on your game and your development, but actually getting minutes on the pitch. If you look at someone like, Cole Palmer, who's a great example, he could have stayed at Manchester City, maybe won a few more trophies, but he would have been a substitute, kind of more of like a bit part player. Whereas he's one of the main men at Chelsea and probably one of the best players in the Premier League right now. But he kind of had to make that decision and figure out, is this the best for my development as a player? This is even more true at the youth level because as a youth player, you don't have a reputation as is. Therefore, if you aren't able to get onto the pitch, you can't build that reputation. You can't command eyeballs and deals and things like that. So career management, particularly for youth players, is extremely important. You got to get minutes, and you have to find a team that's willing to invest in you and get you on the pitch. So then individual training. So I'm going to go and put that at A tier. For me in particular, individual training was one of my favorite things to do as a young footballer. I love to train. I love to learn the art and science of different skills and the biomechanics that comes with it. I think it offers tremendous value for you to work on the things that you need to. But the only reason why I'm not going to put it in S tier per se is that a lot of players do it the wrong way. They don't focus on what gives them the best ROI. Sometimes players will, work on, juggling a lot when that's not something they need to work on in the game. Their freestyling moves, things of that nature. And ultimately, football is a team sport. So having that team environment where you can, execute skills in, a game-like circumstance is what's ultimately going to translate the best to the pitch. So it helps your game a lot, offers a lot of value. But I think I've met players who didn't rely on individual training. They relied more on their team training to get the best out of them. So that's why I'm going to put it in A tier. Next one I'm going to put, we have 1v1 moves. So I'm going to put 1v1 moves in B tier because it is definitely a game changer if you excel in this. To be a defender can open up spaces and really unlock a defense, but at the same time, not every position requires you to have excellent 1v1 moves, right? Neymar was, a phenomenal player that made him into one of the best, but someone like Andy Robertson doesn't necessarily need to be a defender. And on top of that, you also have some players who don't necessarily use moves a lot, like a Mohamed Salah or perhaps a Gareth Bale during his Tottenham days. They were more of cutting inside or just pushing the ball and using their pace. So not being a defender with pace, not being a defender with trickery, being more with your pace. So that's what I'm going to put in B tier, just because it's not everyone needs to have it. So this next one is an easy S tier, emotional regulation, right? And this is particularly within a match. Okay, so I work with a bunch of players, and I've seen it firsthand as a player myself. I've experienced it a little bit, but it's really watching other players. There was always a few of them that were unbelievable in training, but just couldn't translate it to a match. They would be extremely nervous, suffer from performance anxiety. They didn't have the confidence to execute in a match. And again, having that emotional stability is going to allow you to hit the flow state, right? Where you're not overthinking, you're not overthinking at all. Therefore, instinct can take over. And if you have alignment between your body and your mind, then you can play freely and you can play quickly. But in a game of, seconds and inches, if you're overthinking and you don't feel confident to take a penalty or something like that, that is going to have a major, major impact on your game. And is arguably one of the most important things. So I'm actually going to put that at the very highest here, if it lets me. There we go. Yeah, again, if you're not don't have the mindset to play properly, it's just not going to work. Okay, so Skills So Nice, we have it listed twice. We have crossing, so I'm going to put crossing actually at B tier. And the reason why that is because there are many positions that utilize crossing, but particularly playing against low blocks, it's a great way to unlock the defense. There's some players who've made a career off of crossing, such as Beckham, Trent, KDB, and it could be the nail in the coffin for a side, particularly in the latter stages of a match. So just because it could be so critical, I'm going to put it in B tier. Then we go to 50-50s. I'm actually going to put that in A tier because the way football is being played right now, it's so possession-based. It's all about winning the ball back quickly and then maintaining possession, right? And 50-50s is one of the best ways to do that. It's literally the difference between you getting the ball and losing it, right? So I'm going to put that quite high. You're going to see throughout this list, the more a skill set is used during the match, the higher I'm going to put on this list, right? So a lot of that's going to be around, ball retention, passing, receiving, just because you don't use something such as long shots or skill moves as often as something like a 50-50. And even more, it can help you get into dangerous areas. So definitely going to put that up there. Free kicks. So free kicks, I'm actually going to put in C tier. I'm actually was a little tempted to go D tier, and the reason why that is I see so many players working on their free kicks, adding different types of strikes to their match, to their game, and that's because, and the problem with that is that most teams only have 2 to 3 designated kick takers. So if you're not one of them, then you're kind of wasting your time because you're almost never going to find a situation where you have the time and space to have the ball at a standstill and strike it, right? So at the same time, I'm not putting it in D tier because if you're really good at it, it can be devastating. Same idea with crossing. You got players like James Ward-Prowse who practically made it a career off his amazing free kicks because it could be the defining moment, particularly in close matches. So, I could go B, I could go D tier, but I just feel like it's C tier just because not that many players actually execute them, particularly at the youth level where there's not that many goals off of free kicks from with headers and whatnot. So balance and coordination, I'm gonna put up in S tier. The reason why that is I think the basis of all athleticism comes from balance and coordination. I don't care how fast, how strong you are, if you can't balance yourself and orient your body in a way to be athletic, it's not going to work. And again, balance and coordination is kind of like the foundation of technical ability, right? Do you have a low base, wide base? Do you have a low stance, an athletic stance? Can you push off? Things like that. So balance, coordination. You also look at players like Messi. He's getting bumped off the ball, but he's able to maintain just such unbelievable balance to always be in control of his body. So I'm going to put that in S tier because ultimately this is a physical and technical game, and without balance you can't have either of those. First touch, that is an easy S tier as well. Because if you look at, let me back up just 1 second. So we got balance, coordination, career managers. I'm going to put balance, coordination up here. I'm going to put first touch. That's a close one. I'm going to put first touch. I'm going to put first touch here. I'm going to put balance and coordination here. Yeah. So I'm putting first touch so high because you only get so many touches on the ball per match. But obviously, the first touch you're going to get is your first touch. So it's going to set up everything else, right? And if you have, high soccer IQ and a good first touch, then the game is just going to look easy. It's going to feel easy for you because you're just setting everything up ahead of time, and you're going to feel very early and very controlled. So This game is based around ball control, and I think that's an easy first touch particularly if you're playing central midfield or if you're a striker playing in the box. I think first touch is absolutely critical. Off the ball movement, I think I'm going to put that in A tier, and kind of a similar reason that I put a lot of my A tiers. This is something that you use a lot, and you don't get the ball as often as we would like in football. So when you do get it, having good off-ball movement will not only give you a higher frequency of getting the ball, but it'll also put you in better situations to be more dangerous. If you look at players like Cristiano Ronaldo, has some of the best off-ball movement ever. He uses it to create space, to create separation, to give players passing lanes, and it really puts him in dangerous situations. So I definitely think off-the-ball movement is one of the most important skills you can have as a footballer. Juggling, I'm actually going to put in D tier. We hear this a lot in the football community. I don't think juggling is that important. I think having a first touch is really important, but I think juggling per se is not, simply because you're not going to be juggling the ball more than once. I mean, if you juggle it twice in a match, it's very rare. It's very appealing on the eye, but it's rare. And I wouldn't say it's particularly game specific, so I'm going to put that in D tier. Strength. So strength can be useful, but I'm actually going to put that in C tier. I don't think it's quite D tier. I think it's a little bit overrated, but can be useful in some situations. So when I mean strength, I mean ability to basically hold players off the ball. Like Lionel Messi, I don't think is particularly, you wouldn't look at him and say he's very strong, but he's definitely strong on the ball. He doesn't get pushed off it very often. So there's a time and place. Big strikers, particularly in the Premier League, they can be, strength could be a valuable asset for some center backs. But again, there's a lot of players that were not strong at all, and they were fantastic, such as Sergio Busquets. So I don't think it's even necessary for many positions. So I'm just going to keep that at C tier. Now, weak foot, this one's kind of hurts a little bit because I want to put it at A tier, but I think I'm going to have to put it at B tier. I think having a balanced weak foot offers tremendous value, particularly at the youth levels, where it's easier to learn, because it keeps the defenders a little bit more honest, right? It allows you to have more options, because now you can alternate feet, you can push off this way, you can receive the ball on your back foot. It doesn't really matter. It allows you to play however, to adapt to any situation. But at the same time, there are some players who are able to make a career basically having only one special foot, such as, Arjen Robben, who can just cut in. So I'm going to keep it at B tier simply because there are some positions, particularly on the wings, where you're almost never going to need that weak foot. If you're a winger that cuts inside, you're probably going to not need that weak foot that often. Or if you're a wing back that just is a cross-first player, you don't need it as much. But let me just make sure I get these right in terms of the order. So off-ball movement, I'm going to put there. That's good. I'm going to put weak foot at the highest end of B tier. I like that. Volleying, free kicks. I'm going to put free kicks there. I'm going to put strength here just because, again, not a lot of players don't use weak foot. And I'm going to put jumping there. So, yeah, that looks good to me. Moving on, we have shielding, which is, this is a tough one. I think I'm going to put it in the low end of, it's tough. I'm going to put it actually here. No, I'm going to put it here. I'm going to put it at the higher end of B tier because it's something that you do a lot, particularly if the game is being played at a very fast pace in midfield. We're trying to keep the ball safe side. So you have, your body between the ball and the defender. Because if your technique lets you down, you take a bad touch, if you are able to keep that ball safe side, then the worst case scenario, you draw a foul. That's something that's used a lot, but I just can't say it's quite as important as off-ball movement, because a lot of the best players, they don't really need to shield that much because their touch is so good. They don't get themselves into trouble. So, yeah, I'm going to put it right there. It's used often, but you would prefer if you didn't have to. Stamina. This is a tough one because it is important. I'm going to put it at the top. I'm going to put it just above shielding at the top of B tier. It could definitely be A tier, but it's a little bit more specific to positions. The modern game, coaches want you to cover a tremendous distance. Not so much at the youth levels, but definitely at the professional levels. I think it's one of the differentiators, because they can play at a high intensity throughout the entire of the match. They can cover those hard yards. At the end of the match, they can run around. You think of players like N'Golo Kante. He used that as such a valuable asset. That was kind of a game changer for him. But I'm not going to put it quite as high as A tier, just because, again, there's some positions that don't use stamina as much, such as center back. They're not engaging in high-intensity sprints very often. They're covering some of the least distances in the match, and kind of the same thing with some strikers. Particularly in recent seasons, you're seeing strikers kind of getting a little less involved in build-up play and just kind of playing in the box. And because of that, they don't require a tremendous amount of stamina. That being said, if you're a wing back, that's one of the most valuable assets. If you're a 6, that's more of like an S tier. But yeah, for now, I'm going to keep that at B tier. Sprint speed. So sprint speed, I'm actually going to put a little bit below. I'm going to put it below weak foot. And I know that sounds a little crazy. I know people are really caught up on sprint speed because they play a lot of FIFA. But the reality of the situation is, again, you're, as a footballer, if you look at the sports science, you're not really engaging in that many sprints over, you're not reaching your top speed over a long distance very often, particularly if you're playing in midfield. You're more doing short sprints, reacting, changing direction, accelerating, decelerating. So you don't get into that situation very often, but there are some players that can make it their most valuable weapon, such as Kylian Mbappe, where it makes him a game changer. But again, if that's your best, asset about you, they may try to, double team you, play in a little bit lower of a block to deny you space to run into. It's very important, but I don't think, again, it's necessary. If you look at someone like Andrea Pirlo, he wasn't very quick. So I think it's position specific. I think it's amazing to have. I just don't think it's the most important. Football IQ, for me, that's an absolutely easy one. I'm going to put that all the way here. And reason why I have it so high is because I found so many players as a player and a coach that had all the skills, all the physical abilities, but they didn't have the football IQ to tell them when, where, and why to use different skills. So if you don't know how to apply different skills or how to read a game properly, then you're going to be left behind, honestly. And we see so many examples of this from Paul Scholes, Xavi Hernandez, Sergio Busquets again, Luka Modric. To have the intelligence to make decisions on a pitch, it's so valuable. There's a time to pass, there's a time to dribble, there's a time to shoot. So the players that know when to do what are at a completely different level, particularly if they can think one or two steps ahead of the game and analyze spaces on the pitch. So definitely, for me, not quite as important as emotional regulation, just because you can have all the IQ in the world, but if you're not composed, that doesn't even quite matter. So next one is self-belief. So I'm going to put self-belief again in S tier. And I'm going to put that actually above football IQ. Kind of for similar reasons. Like if you don't have the confidence to navigate through the footballing journey, and to think that you're really, that you always feel like you're your biggest fan, then you're not going to be able to overcome the challenges. You're not going to be able to play your best in a match, right? When you truly believe in yourself, that's how you can reach the flow state. So again, I'd rather have a player like that's not quite as intelligent, but is always able to reach that flow state, than a player who's like a genius, but gets very emotionally unregulated, or doesn't, or lacks confidence. So yeah, I'm gonna put that there. Quickness. Okay, so quickness, I'm actually gonna put an A tier. Because again, I think it's just a little bit more important than stamina, in the sense that you're constantly changing direction as a footballer. You're reacting to where the ball is, where the defender is, where the attacker is. So the ability to change direction at a high speed, change speed as well, is absolutely vital. I think it's one of the basis of a footballer. I'm just not going to put it as high as some of the other ones, just because, for example, if you have a high footballing IQ, you can use positioning and reading the game to overcome for a lack of quickness. Okay, so long passing, I'm gonna put long passing just before crossing, and just because when I think of long passing, I think of more of like a diagonal ball to the winger. I don't particularly imagine it being like a penetrating pass where you're in on goal. So it's a great skill to have. It's definitely applicable. It's something that's used a lot, but it's not as important as short passing, and doesn't quite change the game either. So I'm gonna put that there. All right, positioning. So positioning, I'm gonna put it A tier, and that's because no matter what role you play on the pitch, positioning is extremely important. But it's really important in some, right? As a striker, you want to be in the right places in the box. As a defender, you want to make sure you're covering all the right spaces. So I think positioning is really important, but it also sets you up with, if I receive the ball here, what's my next option? Or if I'm going to even receive the ball at all. So positioning, super high level, something that you're doing all the time. So you want to make sure you're in the right spots. Slide tackling, I'm going to put in, I'm on the fence here. I'm going to actually put it at the top of D tier. And the reason why that is because if you listen to some of the best center backs that have ever lived, they always talk about you would only slide tackle if as a last resort, really. A standing tackle is kind of your first resort, and then your slide tackle is the last resort. So you only really use that if you've already been beat or something like that. So that's why I'm going to put it so low. And you just don't see it too often. Don't get me wrong, I love a great slide tackle, but I think I'm going to keep it there. I think it's more important than jumping and juggling. And some defenders might get a little bit mad at me for having it so low, but I just think standing and tackling is much better. Coachability. So coachability, I'm going to put that at S tier. And the reason why that is because coaches, again, they're the gatekeepers for players. They're the ones that decide if you, move on, if you play. And coaches respond really well to players that are coachable. Because, as a coach, they want to inject, their philosophy onto the players. And they want players that can buy into their system. Right, so if you're the type of person that, or you're the type of player that, latches on to the coach's ideas and, and listens to them and applies them, the coach is not only going to play you, but you're also probably going to get a lot better. Coaches more often than not will take players that aren't quite as talented but are more coachable, because they can see them fitting into the system, and they say, you know what, he doesn't have the talent, but in 6 months' time, I'm going to make him exactly the way I want him, and he's going to be a great piece in my side. So coaches love to work with players like that, so that's why it has to be so high. Deception. Deception I'm going to put in A. It's not necessarily a requirement, but deception can be a game changer for so many players. It gives you a greater margin for error, but it also unlocks defenses. So what do I mean by deception exactly? It's like deceiving defenders when you're passing or receiving a ball. So, on the passing side, perhaps I'm opening up my body, and then I'm closing it for reverse last second. And, because of that deception, the whole team defensive structure was pushed one way, and I changed the last second, which could have opened up the defense for a split second. Same thing with receiving the ball. I'm actually a firm believer that you should be having a little bit of deception every time you receive the ball with, a jab step or, a shift of the hips, something like that, because it can buy you those valuable extra seconds, milliseconds, and it can be the difference between you getting tackled and you breaking in on goal. So deception, the best players I ever played with had deception in spades, and that's why I think it's super valuable. I'm actually going to push this. I'm actually going to push this all the way up here. I think it's a high A. A high A tier for sure. Okay, heading. I'm going to put heading. Heading's not quite as... Oh, it's tough. I'm going to put heading at C tier. A lot of players in the Premier League aren't particularly tall. They don't win a lot of headers. But again, it can make the big difference depending on which match you're in. You look at Erling Haaland, he scores a lot of headers. It's definitely important for strikers. It's important for central midfielders to win 50-50s. And obviously it's critical for center backs. That's a huge part of their job is heading the ball. I just don't think in terms of building a complete footballer, I don't think any coach looks at a player and says, oh, you know what, he has unbelievable heading ability. I want him. So I'm just going to put that in. I'm going to put that actually, I'm changing this up. I'm putting strength. I think I meant to put this here, and I'm putting heading just below strength. I'm actually going to put free kicks ahead of volleys. Just because I feel like you score more free kicks than volleys. You can score and assist, whereas with volleys you can only score. Injury resistance. So I'm going to put that actually at S tier because your greatest ability is your ability to play. If you're constantly injured, like someone like Abu Dhabi, he had so much talent, but just so many injuries that completely stifled his career. If you're injured, you can't offer any value to a coach, really. It stifles your development. So a lot of the times injuries can ruin careers or stifle them at critical moments. It can stop you from getting a contract or moving on to another team. If you're not able to get onto the pitch, you're not going to be able to play. So I'm going to put that actually, it's really close to career management, but I think it's slightly better because career management has some elements of luck. And while injury resistance does too, I think if you're injured all the time, you're never going to get anywhere, but you can make a wrong career management and still come back. Invested coaching. So invested coaching, I'm going to put right there, okay? And the reason why that is because, again, a coach can make or break your career. They can make football your happy place or your most miserable place, whether you're on the bench, if you're starting. But a truly invested coach can make such an impact on a player. It can improve their confidence. They can learn a lot. They can learn about life and everything. A proper coach can really offer so much value to a player. I've experienced it as a player. I've experienced it as a coach, and even just some of the feedback that I get from players and parents is, it's very rewarding. Because it does have a big impact. So I'm going to put invested coaching high S tier. Scanning. So scanning is going to go high A tier because almost every position is going to use it. Not so much center backs, just because you're not going to have players behind you too often. because they'd be in offside position, but you might every once in a while. But other than that, 6s, 8s, 10s, scanning's critical. Wingers, strikers, absolutely critical. But scanning is almost as important as football IQ because it's painting the picture of what's around you. Right? When you check your shoulder, you're identifying where the space is, you're identifying where the players are, the defenders, and everything. So it's so important to play at a high speed and to know what you're going to do next. I just don't have it quite as high as S tier because some positions use it less, and also because some players don't scan as often. They just have this natural feel for the game, and they play in front of them quite a bit. So they play the way they're facing. So yeah, I'm going to put scanning at A tier. Muscles, that's an easy D tier. Again, you look at some players that played and they weren't particularly robust physically. Just because you look good in your shirt doesn't mean you're going to be a good footballer. And frankly, sometimes it even slows you down if you have muscles in the wrong places. So it's nice to have. It feels cool. I'm probably going to put it the lowest of the low. It's really it can be helpful, but I would rather have, you could have power, but without having muscles. I guess a good example of that would be Angel Di Maria. Could really explode. Great sprint speed and acceleration, but had absolutely zero muscles. So, yeah, definite D tier for me. Throw-ins. Okay, I know Rory Delap might not enjoy this, but I'm going to put it throw-ins. Okay, I'm actually going to move juggling here, and I'm going to put throw-ins. I'm actually going to put throw-ins above jumping just because of Rory Delap. Don't ask me why, but throw-ins were actually a game changer with his double-jointed shoulders. They were arguably better than a corner kick, so I'm going to put throw-ins there just because of that rare exception. So mentors is really close to invested coaching. A mentor doesn't necessarily teach you the game, but may teach you how to navigate through the game. That's what I think of when I think of a mentor. So I'm gonna put that in low S tier because again, I think a mentor could be an older player that can give you some insights on how to be a professional, how to navigate through this. But they're not quite coaches. They could be coaches, but they're not necessarily coaching you. So I'm gonna put mentors there. Very valuable, particularly if you want to get to the highest levels. Can really help a player on an emotional and professional level, but not quite as important as some of these other ones for me. Power is going to be. I'm actually going to put power a little bit past sprint speed, just because power to me is exerting a high level of force in a fast or a short amount of time. So when I think of power, I don't think of someone who's just necessarily fast, but someone who's also built as well, and can push off players and push past players really. Again, you think of someone like Adama Traore, where he's a good player, but without his power, he'd probably be nothing. So, particularly at the youth levels, it can be a differentiator. But I think at the highest levels, it's important. But I'm not going to put it as high as quickness and stamina for me. And I'm actually going to move quickness over to a little past 50-50s. Okay, so resilience. Resilience is an easy S tier, and I'm gonna put that high because again, the football journey is just so full of twists and turns. The only constant in football is change, and you're gonna have to be able to reprove yourself starting from zero over and over and over again, whether that's playing in a new position, under a new coach, trying out for a new team. To really move up the ranks, you just have to constantly be expecting setbacks and coming back from them. And so having a resilient mindset is absolutely many professionals, including myself and some pros some of my friends will say, without the right resilient mindset, you'll never be able to navigate through the journey. Through balls. So through balls, I'm gonna put through balls. I'm gonna put through balls right. I'm gonna put it right there and in A tier, and that's because through balls are obviously penetrating passes that lead a player in on goal, right? And if you play the right through ball, that could be the difference in a match. That can give your striker the chance they needed to change the game. They're not as useful as they used to be because of VAR. The margin for error on a player's run is so small that teams have kind of gotten a little bit away from playing directly through the center backs, but in behind the wing backs. But there are some players that could create so many opportunities. I think of Cesc Fabregas at Arsenal. Could just play Adebayor or Van Persie in with amazing through balls. So they don't necessarily score you a goal, but they create massive chances. So definite A tier for me. Adaptability. Adaptability is also going to be A tier, but I'm gonna put it right high A tier. So again, you see it all the time as a coach and as a player, but like you might be at U15, the star striker, and then you get moved up to the next level, and now you have to play wing back, right? Particularly the way the game's evolving, it's been much more tactical. So coaches are changing formations all the time. Sometimes they'll have formations within formations, like going from a 4-3-3 to a 4-2-3-1, right? So because of that, coaches really value adaptability, whether that's changing positions or changing your role within a position. So, whether you're going to be a destroyer, central midfielder, defensive midfielder, or you're going to be, a regista where you're going to be, controlling the tempo of a match. To be adaptable makes you a valuable player, particularly for players for coaches that are very tactical. Finishing, I'm putting that in A tier because not every player needs to finish well, but it's again could be the difference in winning a match or losing a match. Kind of a similar thought process with through balls, but I think it's just a little bit higher just because like a true finisher can make goals out of nothing. Through balls don't necessarily guarantee you a goal, but proper finishing does. And again, you look at Erling Haaland, he's a very one-dimensional player, but he does what he does at an extremely high level. So finishing ultimately can take you to the next level and win games. So private training. So believe it or not, with private training, I'm going to actually put it in D tier. And I'm going to put it in D tier, high D tier. And the reason why that is because private training is great. I think small-sided training is one of the best things you can do. But if it's in a small group or just a one-on-one, I'm putting in D tier just because I know I've seen it firsthand how there are so many poor like low-level private trainers out there. They kind of just take players through what I call busy work, where it's like training just for the sake of training. You do get some extra touches, so that does help you on a technical and perhaps a physical perspective, keeps you a little bit more fit. But if that private trainer doesn't know how you play, he hasn't watched your video or gone to any of your matches, so he doesn't know what you're missing as a player, then more often than not, the first lesson may or may not be an eval, but from there, he's not really going to help you that much with your in-game specifics, right? Just because he doesn't know what you're about or how to fix it. And even again, with private training, if you have like 6 players, he'll give you some private, some individual support and attention, but not enough for me to make a big impact. Even if someone does 10 sessions, it doesn't necessarily mean they got better. But again, if you find a good trainer, I've done a lot of private training, with players, it can definitely make a big impact. But most are not very good. Standing tackling. So I'm putting standing tackling above. I'm going to put it over here just because it's related to 50-50s. 1v1 defending is not, it is important. I just think that in terms of being a complete footballer, it's not something I think of unless I'm looking at a defender. But I'm going to put it, I think it belongs in B tier. I think it's important. Sustainable mindset. So, I think we're picking up on a little bit of a trend here, but having a sustainable mindset is one of the most important things, because you might be playing football from the age of 5, and if you want to be a professional, you're probably going to have to play at least 15 years, right? So what happens a lot with players is they hit those high highs, then they hit those low lows, and you do that a couple times because they think they're going to be, I'm the best player in the world, and then they feel like they're the worst player in the world because they didn't start. And you do that over the course of time, going up and down like that, and you're just going to flatline, and that may cause you to, decrease the levels of your performance or just burn out altogether. I've seen it many times in many sports, actually, but mostly in soccer or in football. So I think sustainable mindset is as important as anything. Okay, moving on to short passing. I'm putting short passing in. I think short passing is going to be actually at just below scanning. From a technical perspective, again, passing, receiving the ball are the most important things you can do as a footballer. It happens most often. Your interactions are often going to be less than 3 touches, so it's just going to be either 1 touch or 2 touches. And particularly, again, if as a midfielder, that's going to be, the value you're bringing to the team. Can you connect passes? Can you connect the dots and run play? Can you impose our possession style on the field? Can you not lose the ball in dangerous situations? So no need to explain any further. Short passing is one of the most important things. Speed of play, that is an easy S tier. Wow, that's going to be a hard one. I think I'm going to have to put it just below injury resistance because, you're only as good as your speed of play. We all know that one player that is dominant on the playgrounds or, in 5-a-side, and, they're dominant at the park, but they can't translate it into high-level matches because the higher you go in this game, the faster, more simple play is going to be. That's just the reality. If you go from academy football to reserve league, the speed of play changes dramatically. Same thing if you go from a 3rd division side to a 1st division side. It's completely different. Like I remember playing professionally in Europe. I was playing for a reserve side, and we played with the first team, playing in the top tier of that country. And even when they played rondos, it was like the ball was just ping-ponging around. It was absolutely ridiculous. So, again, I've experienced it. If you can't play at a certain speed, then you're going to look really silly out there. So, speed of play is way up there. Power shot. So, I'm going to put power shot. I'm going to put that above. I'm going to put it above heading. Okay, because you're not seeing as many shots from outside the box as you used to. Just because the data suggests that the risk is not necessarily worth the reward. So you're just seeing players do it less often, and even in the best situations, it's not always going to translate to a goal or testing the goalkeeper. But I think it does offer. You know what? I'm gonna put power shot above free kicks, just because it's something almost every player can do, even if you're a left back. Whereas not every player is going to take free kicks. So could score a worldie, like a Michael Essien situation against Barcelona. But at the same time, yeah, I think it's not quite B tier. I don't think it's used enough. Energy. So energy is close to coachability. I think it's going to be maybe even a little bit higher. Let's see. I'm going to put, energy up there. Because when you look at energy, I mean that from two perspectives. So it's like, showing your energy on the pitch, tracking defenders down, tracking the ball down, winning 50-50s, things like that. Teammates, coaches, the fans, they're always going to appreciate energy, not just because you're helping the team, but it just boosts the team, right? But I also mean energy in terms of like the aura you exude. Energy is infectious as a footballer. So if you have like a low energy and kind of a negative energy, it kind of brings everyone around you a little bit down. Whereas, if you have positive energy and, you can inject that into the game, it gives everybody like a lift. So often I've seen players lose the ball, but then they fight back and do a slide tackle to win it back, and all of a sudden like the team's got like a bigger lift than anything. So definitely very important, and can have just an impact on not only on the field but off the field. And the last one is just going to be height. So I think that one's an easy D tier for me. I'm gonna put it right there. And the reason why D tier or jumping is so low, the reason why height is so low is because, you got Lionel Messi, who's probably the best player of all time, Diego Maradona, and they're 5'7", 5'5", and so on. So obviously you don't need height to be good at every position. You're going to want it at center back, even though Lisandro Martinez is not particularly tall. But it can actually go both ways, whereas if you're playing more on the wings and you rely a little bit more on like a change of pace and the lower center of gravity, actually being on the shorter side can give you an advantage. Again, there's so many players that have had a high level for being short. That were short as well. Wesley Sneijder, Aaron Lennon. You can be a great footballer without being particularly tall. So I'm gonna put that there. But looking over this again, I think I'm very content with the results. Let me know if you think I messed up somewhere, or if you want me to add something to this. What I get wrong? What were you surprised about? What do you think could be different? Really want to hear your thoughts, so make sure to comment below. And in addition to that, when we analyze this graph, it's actually interesting because so many players talk about how they want to improve technically, and they have to. But when I look at this tier list, a lot of the green is actually kind of like mid-tier. They have the most number of entries, but they're mostly mid-tier, so that's interesting to see. I think that's because certain techniques are kind of isolated to different positions, and they're kind of more useful in different situations. So I think that's most important. Physical is kind of spread throughout, but I would say it's a little bit on the lower side. Again, I don't think being necessarily physical is, the number one priority, particularly if you're developing, because your body is going to develop in different ways and at different rates. So I don't think that you should put too much of an emphasis until you've kind of hit puberty. But definitely, it's not important for every player, but it's becoming more and more important. Then, if you look at the yellow, that kind of trends more upward. It's a little bit more top-heavy. I definitely think career management is one of the most important things you can do. Something not talked enough about in the football space, just because it impacts your opportunities to get onto the pitch, right? And as well as your development. So no surprise that that's so high. But the two most highest skill sets, or the most highest pillars, are clearly the mental, the tactical side of it. I don't have any entries lower than the second, or lower than A tier. And that's because, again, as I talk about it, it's one thing to have the skills, but if you don't know when to use them and how to use them, then it doesn't really matter. Whereas I'll take a player who isn't quite as technical, but knows how to make the best of the skills he does have in the right times, the right spaces, and makes the right decisions. That's really what football is all about, is making good, quick decisions to whether unlock defense or maintain possession. So that's extremely top heavy. And then maybe as a little bit of a surprise, the emotional component is actually in S tier. And again, I consider the mental or the tactical and the emotional part of playing to be kind of the software of a player. If that's not there, then nothing else is going to work right, particularly when it comes to the emotion. That's kind of the battery pack of a football player. If you're not able to think clearly and execute confidently, then all of your other skills won't work. Thank you for tuning in, for being so supportive. Thank you for investing in me and in your development. And again, let me know in the comments what you think. And don't forget to like and subscribe.